All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are going to break down a really fascinating investments idea, the search for those potential 10x returns. Yep, that's 10 times your investment that might be hiding inside India's huge push into nuclear energy. We're going to look at the big picture, zoom right in on the companies that matter, and super importantly, we're going to talk about the very real risks involved. And really, it all starts with this one question. What if you could see a massive, decades-long economic shift just as it was getting started? The whole analysis we're digging into today argues that India's plan for nuclear energy could be exactly that. So first things first, let's set the stage with the big picture, the macro opportunity. And we're not just talking about a little bit of growth here. We are talking about something that could be a full-blown supercycle. Now this slide, this number, is pretty much the whole story. India is shooting for 100 gigawatts of nuclear power by 2047. Just so you get the scale of that, it's about 10 to 12 times more than what they have right now. It's a staggering number, and it's the foundation for this entire investment idea. You know, to get that kind of growth, you need an unbelievable amount of money. And that kicks off what's called a capex supercycle. Think of it like a giant, long-term wave of spending. We could be looking at anywhere from 50 to 200 lakh crore rupees flowing into the energy sector. That is the massive tide that could lift all the boats we're about to talk about. Okay, so the opportunity is huge. But the big question is, how do you actually find the companies that could give you those incredible returns? This is where we start the hunt, and there's a very specific logic to follow. So here's the formula, the secret sauce for finding a multi-bagger, which is just a cool term for a stock that can go up many, many times. First, you want to start with a small company because it just has more room to grow. Second, it has to be playing in a massive market. And third, and this is crucial, there has to be high barrier to entry, something that keeps a flood of competitors from coming in and ruining the party. So when you apply that logic, the first name that pops up is a company called MTR Technologies. Let's dig into why. MTR's story is really cool. They make these supercritical, high-precision parts for both nuclear reactors and for India's space program, ISRO. This work is incredibly difficult, and that right there creates the high entry barrier we were just talking about. It's not a simple commodity business, which makes it a classic small-cap compounder, a smaller company that could just steadily grow and grow for years to come. Okay, next up is a completely different kind of story. This one is called Walchand's Nagar Industries, and you can think of this as the high-stakes turnaround play. And this one, well, this is a perfect example of high risk, high reward. Walchand Nagar is already way deep inside India's nuclear ecosystem, making core parts for reactors. The idea here is that if this company can get its act together and turn things around right as this huge nuclear theme is taking off, that combination could be absolutely explosive. It's the wild card. The third name on the list, Hindustan Construction Company, or HCC, plays a totally different but absolutely essential role in all of this. HCC is what you'd call the picks and shovels play. They're not making the reactor parts, they're building the massive concrete structures that house everything. So if India starts building a ton of new reactors, that means a giant pipeline of work for a company like HCC. But, and you really have to pay attention to this part, there are big risks. The analysis points out its current debt and some past struggles with getting projects done on time. Okay, so those were the high-risk, potential home run hitters. But what if that's not your style? What if you're not looking for that 10x lottery ticket? Well, the analysis also looks at the big guys, the core leaders, which offer a very different kind of opportunity. And this table gives you a great little summary of the giants. You've got BHEL, sort of the backbone of the whole equipment supply chain. You have L&T, the massive conglomerate that works across nuclear, defense, everything. And then there's NTPC, the huge government-backed utility that's moving into this space aggressively. These are seen as safer bets, but because they're already so big, their potential upside is probably capped in that 3 to 5x range, which is still pretty darn good. Okay, so we've met the players. How could all this come together in an actual strategy? And probably more important, what's the cold, hard reality check that we absolutely cannot ignore? So here's just one example of what an aggressive portfolio could look like. You can see it's weighted pretty heavily toward those higher risk names, MTAR and Walchand Nagar. Then you have the safer players like L&T and Bell acting as a more stable foundation. Now, of course, this is just an example, but it shows you one way you could think about building a portfolio around this idea. But right after you see that potential, you have to hit the brakes and get a serious dose of reality. Nuclear projects take a long, long time. We're talking 5 to 10 years easy. Delays are almost guaranteed. The whole thing depends on government policy not changing. And maybe the most important point of all, not all of these companies are going to be winners. It's totally possible that just 2 or 3 successful ones end up driving all the returns for this whole theme. And this timeline is so important to understand because it shows you that this is a game of patience. A real 10x winner isn't created overnight. It usually goes through this long, quiet period for years where it looks like nothing is happening. Then you get a breakout, then the earnings catch up, and then only at the very end does it become the hot theme that everyone is talking about. So let's pull all these pieces together and zoom back out. With everything we've looked at, could nuclear energy really be the next big megatrend? The key idea here is that the real value, the real wealth gets created during a transition. It's when a company like MTR goes from just being a supplier to being a critical strategic manufacturer, or when HTC becomes the go-to specialist for building nuclear plants. That's the shift that could create extraordinary returns. And look, if you only remember one sentence from this whole thing, let it be this one. The argument is that the truly massive, life-changing returns probably won't come from the big, well-known giants. They'll come from the smaller, specialized companies that are already inside the system and are absolutely essential to the supply chain. And just to put all of this into context, think about past megatrends that created huge wealth in India, like the IT boom back in the 2000s or the defense sector explosion more recently. The big thing to notice here is the question mark next to nuclear. It's asking, are we standing at the very beginning of that same kind of decades-long story? Which brings us to the final, huge question. We've looked at the idea, the companies, the strategies, and the very real dangers. So looking at everything, is nuclear power about to become India's next 20-year megatrend? That is the multi-trillion rupee question to think about.